Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Emily and I post a ton of bookish content on here for you guys. And if you're not new here, welcome back. Happy to have you. For today's video, I decided I wanted to hop on the bandwagon and do the 5 best and 5 worst books that I've read this year based on Goodreads reviews. So this is not my review, it is just reviews as a whole. You know, someone might have thought that this book was horrible and maybe I rated it a 5-star, or maybe I thought this book was really bad and it's actually highly rated on Goodreads. So I thought it would be really interesting just to see like what people's thoughts were on books that I may have loved or hated. And also I just want to put a disclaimer out here. If there are any books on this list that I personally really did not like, it is no shade to the authors. There are definitely some authors on this list that I've loved many other books from them, but these ones just weren't it for me. Without further ado, I decided I wanted to start off with the worst books based on their Goodreads ratings, so let's get into it. So I'm gonna put all of the ratings on the screen somewhere just so you know that I am not making this up. And interestingly enough, none of these books are actually that poorly rated. I went onto my Goodreads and I had to change the filtering to average rating, and then once I did that, I just had to make sure that I read them in 2022. Because there were definitely a few that had lower ratings that were read either last year or the year before. The very first one that was the 5th lowest rating, sorry if the lighting just got real dark for some reason, the lighting just completely changed outside, but it was actually The Minders by John Mars. This has a 3.81 rating, so like I said, really not that bad at all, but this is my 5th lowest rated book that I've read in 2022. I rated this, I believe, a 3.5, so I guess you could say I agree. I love John Mars, but this definitely was not my favorite from him. It's one of his newer ones, actually. I think it came out in like 2018. This came out in 2020. So this is definitely one of his newer reads. It did not impress me as much as other ones that I've read, but alas, it was a 3.81 on Goodreads, and I gave it a 3.5 as well. So I would agree with the overall consensus that this is maybe not his best work. The 4th lowest rated on this list is actually Set on You by Amy Lee, and this makes me really sad because I rated this a 5 out of 5 myself. I loved this book. I adored this book. It was her debut. She's a Canadian author, and there was such good representation. I love the idea of having like a gym nemesis as a romance. And this right now has a 3.69 overall rating on Goodreads. The 3rd lowest rating on this list is actually One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle, and I will have to say, I do agree with this rating. I believe I gave this either a 2.75 or a 3, something like that, and on Goodreads it has a 3.65 rating. So again, not terrible whatsoever, but just based on all the books that I've read this year, this was one of the lowest ones. So I definitely do agree, and I actually think that it's a worse rating. I really did not like this book. It's probably in my top 5 worst books of the year. That being said though, I did say at the beginning of this that does not mean I, want to put out any shade to the author. I actually love Rebecca Searle, and I've loved previous works from her, so just putting that out there. So we're on the 2nd lowest rated, and I actually don't have it anymore. I did own it, but I currently got rid of it because I hated it that much. So it is Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. This was actually rated 3.62 on Goodreads, and I would argue that that's too high. If you're not aware, this is a horror book about a bunch of different women who are essentially eating and killing men because they're trying to kill them for their estrogen so that they don't have high testosterone level. I don't even need to say anything. It's just very political, very offensive, and I know that the author probably had good intentions in mind with this book, but there really was no plot, no character development. It just really did feel like an ode to I hate men, and I just didn't vibe with it. And surprisingly enough, the lowest rated book that I have read so far, at least, it is like mid-December at this point, but the lowest rated book that I've read this year is The Ex-Hexed by Erin Sterling, and I actually gave this a 4-star. I really liked it. It has a 3.54 stars, so still not that bad, but definitely lower than what I personally would rate this. Does it hold a lot of depth and meaning to it? No, but I do think if you read this at the right time, which is obviously Halloween, and you're looking for a spicy, but not too spicy, entertaining read that gives off that atmospheric vibe of Halloween, I think that you would rate it high too. I think if you read this any other time of the year, maybe you would rate it a little less, but for me, I really enjoyed it, and it's because I read it like the days leading up to Halloween maybe. But regardless, this was a 4 out of 5 for me, but it was a 3.54 on Goodreads. Alright guys, let's dive into the top 5 best books I have read based on the Goodreads reviews. So, starting at the 5th highest is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I feel like a lot of us knew that this would be on the list, and also I cannot believe I only read this at the beginning of 2022. I could have swore I read it last year, but anyway, I digress. This has a 4.35 star rating on Goodreads, which is very, very high, and with good reason. If you don't know what this book is about, it is about Lily and Atlas as well as Ryle. So it is basically Lily's story about growing up in a domestically abusive home, and she gets into this relationship with a guy named Ryle who is much older than her, and he has a little bit of an anger streak, and she's realizing these patterns that were happening in her childhood home. She doesn't like it, she needs to make a change, and Atlas, who was her first love when she was 15, comes back into her life and kind of helps her realize that and realize what she deserves. I gave this a 4.75 stars, so I definitely understand the hype around this, and I also rated It Starts With Us, which just came out I think 2 months ago now. I gave that a 5 stars. So I totally understand the hype on this one. It is the 5th highest rated on my list of books that I read this year. And keeping up with Colleen Hoover, the 4th highest rated book that I read this year is actually Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, and this is my favorite Colleen Hoover book. Gave this a 5 out of 5. Honestly, probably like a 6 out of 5. I loved this book so much, and clearly so did you guys, because it has a 4.5 rating on Goodreads, so super close to It Ends With Us, and this one came out January of 2022. Wow, that's crazy. I feel like it came out like not that long ago, but anyway, it has a 4.5 rating, and I totally understand why. This book, we follow Kenna, and she is just coming out from prison after a mistake she made like 4 years ago, and she is wanting to reunite with her 4-year-old daughter and try and be in her life, but there are people in her daughter's life who do not want her associated. Then she meets Ledger, who is a bar owner in the city, and he basically helps her get in touch with her daughter and reunite with her because he sees the good in Kenna, and it is just such a beautiful story. I cried like a baby, and I highly recommend you read this if you haven't. Every time someone comes into Indigo, if they're looking for a Colleen Hoover book, this is my first recommendation. I do have a lot of other ones, obviously, but this is the first one I always recommend to people because I just adored it so much. The 3rd highest rated I actually do not have in person. I listened to it as an audiobook, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is one of the only memoirs I think I read in 2022, honestly, and I have zero regrets. It is amazing. I don't even think I need to go into detail about this, but it's basically just about Jeanette's life and what she went through as a child and getting casted on iCarly, and her relationship with her mom and food and alcohol and all of these things. It's a very touching story. I highly recommend you read it. Search up trigger warnings though. Honestly, search up trigger warnings for every single book in this top 5 best books, because I would say every single one has some sort of trigger warning, but I think that that's what makes books good, is the meaningfulness and the depth, and usually that tends to kind of talk about trauma or things that might be a little bit triggering. So I'm Glad My Mom Died had a 4.61 rating, and I 100% agree. I gave this a 5 star. For the number 2 spot at the best books I've read based on their ratings, I decided to actually just smash 2 together because they're in the same series, and that is Akamath, or A Court of Mist and Fury, and Aquawar, or A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas. I gave both of these a 5 star. I adored them. I will say I think I liked Aquawar just a little bit better, which is actually rare. I feel like a lot of people like Akamath the most, and I agree. I think it's still incredible. But this is an entire fantasy romance series, adult fantasy romance series. It has a lot of spice, a lot of action. We follow Feyre and Rhysand and Tamlin in the whole inner circle, and honestly, there's not really much I can say. You just need to read it yourself to know how good it is, because it is incredible. And this has a 4.44 rating on Goodreads, on average. Like, I know both of these have a little bit of a different, but on average about 4.44, 45 on Goodreads. So high, like that is a crazy rating. So I highly recommend you pick these up if you haven't in the new year. Hello, editing Emily. Just to come on here and say that I only showed Akamaf's rating of 4.62, and I was saying 4.44, which is actually Akawar's rating. If I actually gave an average, that is 4.52. I also don't realize up until now editing that I'm Glad My Mom Died is actually the second highest, not the third, so these should be switched, but they're still both really high up there in ratings. And before I announce my top book that I've read based on ratings on Goodreads, I just wanted to come on here and say a little bit about my Etsy too, because it is nearing the holidays at this point, and if you are looking to support small and get some handmade items for some of your bookish friends or family, I do have an Etsy shop where I sell custom bookmarks, crochet sleeves for your books and e-readers, blind dates with books, which are great. They come with a little tea bag and a sticker, and just a lot of book accessories that I think you guys would be really interested in, so I will definitely leave that link down below. Be sure to check it out, and I think this will be the last video I post where it would probably come in time for Christmas. So I just wanted to mention that before we get to the final book. Going into the last book, or should I say books, are the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman, and oh my gosh, I loved this series so much. Love the TV series, love the 4-book graphic novel series. I want more and more of Nick and Charlie. I am obsessed. So I decided to smush them together once again just because it's a whole series, and they were all up there on the top, like they were probably the top 5 or 6, honestly. But if I were to average out their ratings, it has a 4.65 average rating. That is insanely high. I think I've only ever seen maybe like one other book with like a 4.8 star, but with the amount of ratings this book has, which you will see right here, that is insane. Insane. There are so many people who have rated this 5-star to allow it to be that 4.65 rating, and it deserves that so much. Personally, I gave this a 4 out of 5, not because I thought there was anything wrong with it, just because it was graphic novel and I was starting off with my graphic novel journey through these books, so I wasn't really sure how I felt in the time, but now with my feeling of the book and the relationship of Nick and Charlie and all of their friends, watching the TV show, I do have to say this is a 5 out of 5, and I totally agree with this rating. I think that it is so worth the hype, and if you're not aware, the second season just wrapped up, so the second season is actually going to be coming out in the new year as well, and I'm really excited about that. So there you have it, you guys. Those are the 5 worst books based on Goodreads ratings that I have read this year, and the 5 best. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Maybe you got some recommendations for books that you want to read. Maybe some of those lower rated books interest you and you want to see if they're going to be good for you, because as you did see, I mean, some of them were great for me, and it just really depends on what you look for in a book. But without further ado, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I do post every single Friday, and I will see you guys in the next one.